Gina. You're on the line. What would you like to talk about today?
Oh, sorry, I had to turn that off in the background. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Hello?
Gina?
Okay,
Yep, we
great.
can.
Hi. So, so I know I just came across this stream, and so that's why I kind of called it. Kind of briefly, they said it was, I don't know, like science versus, I don't know. I guess I don't know what you guys do. Anyways,
Oh, first time caller. Okay. So I would.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, look. Okay, so I know that you're talking about abortion or whatever like that, and so I feel like I'm qualified to call in. I'm a female.
Well, I mean,
right?
if you want to talk about abortion, we can, but that's not specifically what we talk about. We are non-believers, and we tend to speak to other non-believers about what the journey is like for them, and also we talk to people who are currently believers in myriad religions about what they believe and why, and kind of have dialogue about where we differ. That's what we do here.
Oh, well, it was about embryos, so it was more of the science because it said science and something else. And so I was going to ask the question, why is there, and maybe you guys might know, or somebody out there might know and can call in. So, because it kind of it is a moral thing, which kind of goes along with theism and atheism, right? So as to be, those with God and those without God. So that's what that means. And everybody knows that that's what the Greek word, it comes from, what is it, A and Theo, those are two Greek words. And it means A always means to be without. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if people know that the root words for all of that. So anyway, the question that I had is, why does the scientist or the science field actually only, it's kind of like the world agreement that they don't test or do scientific studies on embryos longer than 14 days. Why is that?
I am not a scientist, and I wasn't aware of that.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not even certain if that is the case.
Yeah. So that poses that even the science community believes something out there, because they say that once an embryo is fertile or egg is fertilized, that they can't explain one thing, and this is science also, that there's a flash of light, and they don't know where it comes from.
Okay, so that is brand new information. I'm not even 100% sure. Can I stop you for like 2 seconds, Gina, just because I'm not even sure I understand your question?
Yeah.
No, I do. I need to stop you for a sec because I need to clarify. Gina, I need to clarify something because I'm still not entirely sure where your first point was coming from. So when you say scientists won't test on embryos after 14 days, you mean embryos that are no longer in the body, like that have either been aborted or miscarried? Is that, or are you talking about when they're still?
Yeah, no, no, I don't know how they get their embryos for science. So however they get those ones for science. Now, I'm not talking about in vitro fertilization, things like that. But however, they do talk about the designer babies and things like that, where they're manipulating those types of things.
No, but what are you talking about when you talk about the 14 days? Let's back to your very first point, because we're going all over the place. I need to pin you down the first point. You said scientists won't perform studies on embryos past 14 days, right? You said that. What do you mean by that? Do you mean
consensus because of moral reasons? It's unethical to do it. It's in the field of science. It is unethical to perform science experiments on embryos older than 14 days.
I don't think that that's the case, though, because I know that they do all kinds of studies on cadavers of all ages, right? So it would seem really incongruent to me that they could do research on. But no, Gina, listen to me talk though for a second. Like, you came to ask a question, so just listen to me respond to the question. So I don't believe that that is the case, because I know for a fact that science is done on bodies of all ages. So unless you're suggesting that scientists are drawing some sort of moral line specifically relating to embryos that doesn't apply to fully actualized live humans and children.
Cells is something different than dead cells. Well, no, ma'am. Live cells are different than dead cells, so that's a totally different thing. So,
are you talking about when they're still in the womb? Are you talking about while they're still in the womb?
Can I try and clarify? I've done like some back of the napkin searching.
Please, Will, help me.
It looks like there is. Yeah, it looks like there is a 14-day rule with research on living human embryos. And if I'm like just really quickly, living out of the womb human embryos, we don't want 6-month-old fetuses being tested on, being harvested, being taken apart alive. So it seems like they can do basically whatever they want to 14-day-old embryos, but following that, they tend to not do research.
Well, they couldn't develop much past that probably in... if this is before they're embedded.
There are a few reasons for it.
So there'd be a ceiling, and also you would want them to potentially be viable, and they also likely belong to somebody.
Well, so you can change and manipulate the cells, and it could cause deformities, and it can cause cell. It messes with the cells. So it messes with almost
then that
DNA.
Would make sense. If what you're talking about is experiments to like augment their genetic structure, then that would make sense, because you wouldn't want to potentially cause somebody to be impregnated with an embryo that is going to have mutations that we can't predict. So ethically, that would be something that would be a like a line. So that makes sense to me. And now I'm clear. You're talking about like test tubes, like fertilized outside of the body. In my mind, I thought she was saying like you like had a miscarriage or an abortion, and they were not going to do any research. And they absolutely 100% do that all the time.
Right.
Okay. Now that's much more clear. Thank you, Will.
That would be just wrong to do that at that frigging point, because then, that at some point does not become an embryo, but at that stage is when they noticed that they can change the cells, and it goes on to grow that new way or malformed or however it.
Well, I mean, there's a ceiling to how much an embryo can grow outside of a human womb currently, right? So there's like an absolute ceiling for how far it can develop, like in a petri dish. Otherwise, a lot of women would opt out of pregnancy and just be like, grow me that baby, right? We wouldn't put our bodies through that. That's not
the other thing,
that we can do. Yeah, go well.
Yeah, is the other thing just immediately looking this up. Like every single major ethicist talking about this. It is a long-running policy of a bunch of places, but there's a huge amount of ethicists calling for it to be extended, right? Like, because medicine has changed, and we've changed that upper ceiling and what we know about fetuses at the time, and we know their development much more predictably and whatnot. So BMJ, right, published in the Journal of Medical Ethics, is calling for it to be moved to the 28. A huge thrust of UK scientists are calling for it to be moved to 28 days. I'm also kind of failing to see how this is relevant, right? Like you can also not test on a dead body without consent sometimes, right? That's medically unethical. Doesn't mean that they're living, breathing human beings that we should give rights to and care about. Doesn't mean they have the right to the mother's body. So medical ethics and like scientific ethics is like an incredibly complicated space that has to do with consent. And has to do with what they generally find icky, and it's a huge series of things that is outside of like quite a strict discussion of what abortion or what would be permissible under abortion, etc.
Oh, it comes back to these moral and ethical things as a society. If we're to survive, I mean, let's talk about that. If we're actually to survive, how is it that us playing God like that, we don't accidentally F everything up, I just, I don't know if I want to change them in my society,
Yeah, how Will's question was how, like, us
how?
playing God, how?
Pardon?
How are we playing God?
How?
Yeah.
Well, okay, so let me tell you why. Because if we start to change the cells, we start to, people are going to get more and more curious, and then they're going to want to start combining them with like animals, like they probably already do. You know what I'm saying? This is the kind of weird, they're growing ears on rats. Come on. You guys, think about it. We are starting to be that creator. And that is the problem, because we could end up creating something. And if you guys listen to these stories that are in the
Do you think that we should have medicine? Do you think that we should cure cancer? Do you think that we should do transplants? Do you think that we should do any sort of cosmetic surgeries? Okay, so all of those things are us. Do you think that we should do genetic treatments if they will cure diseases? So all of these things are in line with what you say is playing God and is dangerous. However, they have an outcome that you deem as beneficial, right? So and they don't directly relate to procreation. Therefore, you're classifying them differently, even though they're functionally the same thing.
You guys are atheists and theists. Let's talk about that part of it, because what you guys are going off, I'm not sure if you guys have heard about the Book of Enoch. But it's very well known. It's part of the apocryphal books that are actually part of some Bibles and not part of many, because they took it out back in the 1600s. And the apocrypha means hidden things. These were dozens of books that were actually removed from the original Bible. I believe it was the original King James Bible. And
I know
you
what
can always
apocrypha
find
means.
it in Ethiopian Bible. And so in this Book of Enoch, it actually talks about the angels of God that actually mated with mankind and created these giants. And the giants. Yeah.
The Nephilim.
So this is. And,
yeah, no, I've read the Bible.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you read the Apocrypha, right?
Well, the Nephilim were actually in Genesis. Yeah. So, yeah. Okay.
They were.
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, they're in several books. They're in several books. Yep.
Yeah.
So and they believe that the Hittites were actually like part of that Nephilim. So
right.
I mean,
well, I'm unsure how this ties back to our conversation. Is this tying back to our conversation because you were going to say the Nephilim were bad because they were some sort of hybrid that was outside of God's plan?
Okay, no.
Gina, I need you to stop talking for a second so that I need to affirm that you're listening to what I'm saying. Is where you're going with this.
Well, I was the
Nephilim. No, Gina, I need you to listen for a sec while I'm talking. You've been talking steadily through while I'm trying to respond to you. So I need you to just so that we can have a conversation and you can acknowledge that you're understanding what I'm saying. Because it sounds to me like where you're going with this is that you're saying that we are kind of messing with the foundation of like what it is to be a human potentially with all of this genetic stuff that we're doing. And if we look in the Bible, when the angels had babies and messed with genetics, that resulted in the Nephilim, and they were bad and were headed down that road. Is that what you're trying to say?
Well, that's not what I'm saying at all, actually. What I was going to say was to finish the story, and you guys can read it or listen to it for yourself, short book on even YouTube here that you guys can go. It's part of like a public,
we both read it.
Thing.
We've read the Bible.
So basically, it goes on to say that these particular angels had agreed upon coming down and mating with the humans and taking their punishment. And when they came down here and mated with the humans, they fell in love with them and started to teach them things that they weren't supposed to know, which is how to create certain metals and how to adorn themselves with makeup and jewelry and things like that. This is what these angels, they taught us how to, things that would lead people to gluttonous, selfish,
to make alloys and cosmetics.
Behavior.
God forbid.
Yeah, it's just, you know what I mean? And so in this created chaos, it was for us to learn, but not in the time that we learned it. We kind of skipped a bunch of stuff because we got a helping hand. And that's why
once again, God forbid.
That's why after the flood happened, it actually talks about it in this book, in the book of Jubilees, in the book of Jasher. There's several other books, Esdras and Judas.
I'm gonna stop you again because we're deviating. We're deviating. I think you've had a lot of time to articulate your point, and it sounds to me like what you're saying is maybe. One sec, Gina. So it sounds to me like what you're saying is maybe my initial point was off, and what you're actually ambling towards is that we only should learn things when God decides we should learn things, and if we learn things outside of his plan of when we should learn things, then that's bad for us and it results in detrimental things.
Well, the way that you say that makes
is that not an accurate representation of what the point you were making was?
So the thing is that we are not just, we're not, we are actually one. We're one race. And in order for us to survive, we need to, try not to freaking manipulate our own race by doing things like that. That's kind of the point that I'm making.
By doing things like what? Like what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that, though? Doing things like what? Like medical research so that we can cure diseases or prevent them from ever happening to begin with at the embryonic stage?
Well,
so that we can be a healthier, longer living, more thriving race all as one, and that will benefit all of society? Like, why is that
life begins within that 14 days?
Doesn't matter when you define where life begins. That doesn't seem to even actually be connected to your point. Like your point seems to be that we're messing with stuff we shouldn't mess with because it's God's job to mess with that stuff, and we're playing God. And in the past, when we've done that, if you look at the Bible, that's resulted in bad things happening to us because God's laid out the parameters of when we can and can't learn things and what we can and can't learn. And if we go outside the parameters of what God says we can and can't learn, then we're going to get punished for that by bad things happening to us.
Those that don't learn
you recognize, it sounds like you're affirming to me that that's what you're saying.
That seems to be the argument, and I just want to note, the conclusion of that argument is that none of us should be wearing clothes, by the way. Right, like in Genesis, that's let's just talk about this. Let's take your mythos at the face value. When the apple of knowledge is eaten, they become aware of their nakedness. It's a knowledge that God did not want humans to be aware of, and then them wearing clothing is a sign of their straying away from God. In a very similar way that them being given forbidden knowledge from the Nephilim was, right? And the only reason they said all that issue about the Hittites in actuality is because they didn't like them and they weren't the Hebrew people. But,
Well, how you interpret a lot of the God stuff is not necessarily always how God means it. I guess I would say...
How do you interpret Genesis other than that? Yeah.
Well, okay, for instance, here's an interesting story. So, when Adam and Eve, they left the Garden of Eden, God gave them garments, right, of skin. Okay, it says it in this book. It says it in the book. It says that he gave them garments of skin, and those skins
so they could clothe themselves because they were ashamed.
And
because they were
Noah
ashamed.
Brought them on the ark with it. Listen, please. Noah
also got drunk and then and banished his son for seeing him naked. After the ark landed, Noah got wrecked. Just absolutely wrecked, stripped down, bare ass naked, and his son laid his eyes upon his nakedness, and Noah cast him out.
Let me say
the eyes of them were both open, and they knew they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together.
So that's I get it, because that's like having your dad in a nursing home and the freaking orderlies or whatever come in and they see his ass crack hanging out, but he's sicker than a fucking dog or whatever. And they go in and they're all snickering and they go out and they tell their little friends and they're like, oh my God, so-and-so in room whatever's got his ass hanging out. Ha ha. How do you think it's their family with the rest of them? What happened? The other two sons walked in backwards with the covering and covered their father. That's what they did. That's what the story is. So tell the story right.
I told the story the way that it was in the Bible. Noah cast them out. Noah got drunk. They saw his nakedness, even though they were trying to cover him, and he cast them out. Gina, and it's still deviating from your point. We're losing the plot here, Gina. We're losing the plot. We're losing the plot. The initial point was how you're saying basically we're taking that. Please just listen for a second, because you're just talking straight through what we're saying. What I'm saying is your point is, well, Will and Shannon, the way that you're looking at the Bible is probably the wrong way. Your subjective interpretation is the inaccurate one. My subjective interpretation is in fact the accurate one. But there's a tacit admission there. What you're admitting is that the inviolable word of God that we are all supposed to look at for our entire lives so that we can make sure that we know what to do is only able to be viewed through a lens of subjectivity at an individual level. And that makes it functionally useless, because if you're saying that you and I can read the same passage and both have a legitimate interpretation based on our subjective perspective, you have no footing to say yours is right and mine is wrong, because they are both subjective.
You're right. God is a sevenfold spirit. Well, how one scripture speaks to one person is totally different than it is to another person, because they just may not have heard it. Because in the Bible, it actually says that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the words of our testimony.
Then, Gina, it is useless.
Then it's useless. All of these things.
Then it's useless, because I can subjectively interpret a passage in the exact, total, categorically opposite way that you do. And you're saying that's fine. That's okay. That's the way that the world should operate. The world should operate in a fashion that both of us can look at something that's so subjectively malleable that people can come to completely opposite positions from the same starting point. And you're saying that's the right starting point. That's what we should be looking at. And I'm saying that seems crazy to me.
No, we came to the same conclusion. Did we not? In the beginning? We came to the same conclusion, right?
No, I don't think so. No. You completely disagreed with both Will and I and said that our interpretation was wrong. You said you're interpreting it wrong.
You did yell at us for telling the story wrong, which was wild.
Yeah, you said you yelled at us. You said you need to tell the story right. You were telling the story wrong.
Okay, retell the story. I'm good. Retell the story.
We're talking about all right, Gina. I want you to call back. I want to talk to you again, Gina. But I want you to pick one thing. One thing. That's one thing. And we will talk about that one thing. We have several other callers in the queue that I have to take. I very much enjoyed chatting with you.
Let's get to them. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye, Gina.
Bye, Queen.
I want to talk to her every day. She was fun. I don't know if she heard anything that we were saying, because she just talked straight through. It was wall to wall. That was
she was like, we got to the same conclusion. Girl, we didn't get through anything. We didn't get to the same starting point. What do you mean? What do you mean conclusion?
That was my thought. Have we reached a conclusion? Because we started with embryos and 14 days and what that means.
And we got
for
to the
morality.
Nephilim.
We got to the Nephilim.
Also, there's a reason they're the apocryphal book in Christianity. And it's because, like, in the larger canon of Christianity, they make no sense. So I'd love to talk to you, Gina, about the Nephilim, right? And how they show the pantheistic origins of the Bible. That'd be great. But,
I wonder what she thinks about the documentary hypothesis. Anyway, I hope Gina calls back. I hope she calls and talks to me and whoever else. I want more Gina.
Get a biblical scholar up here. Get a good biblical scholar up here. And then they can talk forever.
Yeah, that's fun. For sure. Have Dr. Josh come in. Dr. Josh Bowen would be a great person, or like Dan McClellan. Those would be
Oh my
super
god,
fun
I
people to
literally was
listen.
thinking of Dan McClellan. All like,
Yeah.
yeah,
He's
yeah.
got the patience, so
He would-
both of them have the patience for it.
Hey, it's Jimmy Snow here. I'm the executive producer on the line with a fun fact. Did you know 100% of the hosts of this channel enjoy eating? It's true. And if you would like to help contribute to their ongoing addiction, you can do so by going over to Patreon or becoming a channel member. There are show-specific, host-specific tiers. Those are awesome. But also, you can leave a super thanks with a special little highlighted comment. You can like, comment, and subscribe. All of those will help fill our whittle bellies. By the way, check out some of this content over here. Algorithm, what next?